Welcome to this week's episode of the Jewish Diaspora Report. On this week's episode, we look into the angels in the diaspora. Let's get started. This past week, the Times of Israel reports immigration drills test Israelis' readiness for an en masse ingathering of exiled Jews. The subheading talks about how Israel has to learn from their mistakes of the past. In the 1970s and then the 1990s, following the fall of the Soviet Union, Israel found itself trying to bring in hundreds of thousands of Jewish people. By some estimates, over that entire span, 1 million Soviet Jews returned to Israel. And unfortunately, in these very large waves of immigration to Israel, Israel struggled to find places for them to live in order to get through all the paperwork, find them jobs, and it's a very difficult thing. And Israel has realized that this might be happening again. When we talk about the Soviet Jews coming to Israel, it was because they were mistreated in the Soviet Union and were locked in and couldn't leave. And the minute they were able to, they fled to their homeland to find safety and to get away from the persecution. It really isn't that different today, where the Times of Israel is talking about preparing themselves for another massive influx of foreign Jews. This time it's not because of the Soviet Union, but it is because of all of the countries around the world showing themselves to be, let's just say, not very nice to the Jews. Whether it's due to immigration of Middle Eastern and North African people who are taking over countries and causing trouble in those countries, or it's the liberal governments around the world that refuse to deal with this terrorism and allowing the anti-Semitism to continue unfettered. But it is clear that Jews around the world are heading home, back to Israel. And the country, smartly I would suggest, is getting ready for this eventuality, where all of the world's Jews, or many of them, will be heading home to Israel, all in a very short amount of time. There really is only so much that the world's Jewry can put up with out in the diaspora before it either becomes too unsafe or they just can't put up with the anti-Semitism anymore. For those of you who have listened to some of our older podcasts, especially the ones about Zionism, you would know that this is literally the reason that modern Zionism exists. People in Europe were being attacked for being Jews, and they needed a place to go. And that's why we have Israel today. So it's not surprising when people around the world who are seeking that exact same thing are looking towards Israel. Many of my listeners, especially the Jewish ones, probably understand the right to return. Jewish people, since the 1950s, when the state created the right of return law, have a right, if they are Jewish, to return to the land of Israel and get citizenship and be protected. In the 1950s, the state of Israel decided to create a right of return law, not ironically, based on the German Nazi Nuremberg laws. The laws that said if you were Jewish enough to be sent to a gas chamber, you were Jewish enough for the state of Israel to protect you from that hate. And for many years, Jews around the world have been using this right of return to go home and get out of the hate-filled diaspora country they came from. I myself even talked about this exact issue way back in 2022 in episode number 12. Yes, believe it or not, that was a lot of episodes ago. And in episode 12, I talked about whether or not I should consider making Aliyah, meaning going home to my homeland. And what's somewhat crazy about this is the fact that that was before October 7th and before the incredible amount of anti-Semitism we're seeing around the world. And even back then, I was thinking maybe I should be making Aliyah because things are not looking good for the Jews around the world. Obviously, I don't need to tell many of my listeners that things have gotten way worse post-October 7th. And here I find myself, yet again, thinking maybe it's time to consider making Aliyah and getting my citizenship to Israel, whether it's to physically live there forever or just to have as a backup. Much like the way that Israel right now is trying to prepare itself for the influx of people like me who are going to need to go home at some point when things get really bad and really dangerous for Jews, and governments around the world are no longer protecting us, I too am thinking I need to maybe protect myself. And maybe that is to go get the citizenship paperwork out of the way before I need to do it while fleeing for my life. If myself and my wife decide we need to go quickly, we might not have time to do all the paperwork. Or God forbid things get so bad that your diaspora country decides, like the Soviets, not to let you leave. I'm not sure if it's just me or if other Jews are feeling the same way, looking towards Israel and maybe doing a Google search on how difficult it is to go through the Aliyah process. But something really stuck out to me this week specifically, aside from hearing about this news in the Times of Israel. I never really expected for this podcast to be some type of Jewish theological podcast, but it kind of feels sometimes like the Torah portion is speaking to exactly what I'm feeling and what's going on in the world, which I know the rabbis will suggest is on purpose, and that the Torah portion is in fact always talking about now and what's going on. It's supposed to teach us a lesson. In this week's Torah portion, Vayetze, we learned about Jacob, who saw in a vision a ladder of angels going up and down. The significance of this Jacob's ladder, as it's known, is the fact that some angels were going up into heaven and some were coming down to earth. And many scholars and rabbis have discussed what this means, what this vision is, what is Jacob's ladder. And the rabbis of the Midrash explain that the angels that are ascending up the ladder were angels who had accompanied Jacob within the land of Israel while he was in Israel. The descending, ones that were coming down to earth, were new angels assigned to accompany Jacob outside the land of Israel. And this got me thinking a little bit about my situation, and frankly, maybe our situation if you are not in Israel yourself. The angels that protect the Jewish people outside of the land are different than the angels that protect the Jews and people in Israel. Right before Jacob leaves the land of Israel for the first time, the angels need to switch because they have different roles to play. The angels that are living and staying inside the land of Israel are seen as holier, closer to the prophetic experience, and under more direct divine governance, whereas the angels that go with him outside of the land of Israel are there for protection on foreign soil. The environment outside of the land of Israel will be much less holy, will be, for lack of a better word, spiritually messy, and they will have to contend with that issue, as will he. And being in the exile will require these angels to do a much different job than the ones who live within the land. The way that I interpret this is the angels that are in Israel are pure because they have to be there for God and the Jewish people in order to fulfill all of the requirements and the mitzvot in Israel. Kind of similar to washing your hands before you pray and eat, or going to the mikvah before your wedding. You want to be spiritually cleansed, and you don't want to do things that would have you unclean spiritually. So the angels that are in Israel stay in that state of holiness, whereas the angels who go out into the world, that messy spiritual place further away from God, they kind of need to be warriors. And sadly, warriors kind of get a little messy when they're trying to protect something. So it made me realize that since the time that Jacob left to his diaspora experience, God has already set forth these rules where living inside Israel is safe, holy, better, and the places outside of the land of Israel will be messy. We will deal with hate, and we will have to protect ourselves. And the angels who have to protect us also need to get a little bit messy. It's not going to be a perfect, beautiful experience like it would be, let's say, in Jerusalem. It kind of seems like this is the way that it had to be. Everyone who's living in the diaspora was going to have to deal with these messy situations. So it really isn't all that surprising that there are so many people who are considering going to Israel and moving there forever. According to some statistics, 110,000 to about 125,000 Jewish people have made Aliyah to Israel between 2023 and 2025. This is the exact thing that Israel has been preparing for, a mass migration of Jews leaving their diaspora lands and coming back home. And I am no different. I'm thinking about getting Israeli citizenship for the day that I eventually have to leave this country. As we watch these international governments completely give up on the Jews, not protect them, at most they pay lip service, but I don't even think they're doing that anymore. Most of these governments couldn't care less to make their Jewish communities feel safe. They are allowing, either purposefully or by inaction, pro-Pali, Western useful idiots to terrorize Jewish communities, unfettered. In Canada specifically, We recently saw two major incidents that happened in one of the largest Jewish populations in the world. Toronto, in Canada, has approximately 180,000 to 200,000 Jewish people, which makes up about 49%, or almost half, of the entire Canadian Jewish population in one city and the surrounding areas. And in that Jewish city, we saw, not that long ago, the raising of the Palestinian fake flag at Toronto City Hall. Often we see them put these flags up for symbolic reasons. When the conflict with Ukraine went up, they put that there. When it's LGBTQ month, they put that flag up. And somehow, I don't know how, someone convinced them to put a Palestinian flag, a pro-terror flag, up on the pole at City Hall. It was a huge event where all of the anti-Semites came out to cheer how unsafe we're making the Jews feel. Needless to say, there was a very large protest from the Jews saying this shouldn't happen, this is completely inappropriate. At the same time, we are seeing a rise in anti-Semitism. You are going to put a Palestinian flag up at City Hall just to show the Jews they are not welcome here. It was a horrible mistake, but the court said, too bad, you're allowed to do it. We cannot stop the Toronto government from doing it. And it's probably not a complete accident when weeks before, the mayor of this city, Aliyah Chow, got in front of a group of Muslims and declared that she said there's a genocide in Gaza, despite the fact that there isn't a genocide in Gaza. This mayor, who's been an utter failure for protecting the Jewish community, is getting herself involved in international affairs that make no difference in the city, much like we see in New York, for example, with their mayor getting involved in international politics. But the simple fact that these cities are now turning against their Jewish populations, they are signaling, either overtly or covertly, that there's no room for you Jews here. We will not protect you. We stand on the side of those who are trying to attack you, and we're not going to stop them from doing it. And it seems like we might also support them by putting their flag up on our flagpole. Again, we don't even see these mayors and leaders even pay lip service to the fact that, yeah, we love the Jews, we want to protect the Jews, but also we're going to put this flag up in a Jewish city, but it's for both of you. We want to make sure everybody is safe. They don't even pretend that. They just give up on the Jews altogether. At what point do the Jewish people of Toronto decide this is no longer a safe place for us? We need to leave. We need to make Aliyah. Is it the mobs of people carrying Palestinian flags around Jewish neighborhoods, threatening people and intimidating them? Or is it when the government officially condones hanging that same flag up on the City Hall flagpole? At what point do we realize there is no hope left for us here? The government has officially given up on protecting us and seemingly supports our enemies and the people who call for our death. And sadly, it's not like we've never seen this before. This has happened very frequently in Jewish history, where Jews are eventually not liked enough to eventually be kicked out of a country or a city. We saw places like Spain and Portugal kick out their Jews. We saw places in the Arab world kick out their Jews. And we even saw places like England kick out their Jews, only to bring them back and then kick them out again. History is indeed repeating itself, where the Jews become the blame and the scapegoat for everybody in a city or a country. Eventually they are made to leave or choose to leave on their own for their own safety. And typically, I hate to say, those diaspora countries always fail. Unfortunately for them, when the Jews leave, so does all the brain power. And it usually triggers some type of dark ages for a country. Complete collapse of their economy, which is why England eventually brought back the Jews, only to kick them out again. And this is probably why the angels who protect the Jews in the diaspora have to be much stronger warriors, a little less pure. Look what we're up against. While I was talking to a friend of mine about this topic, someone from Israel, she was saying that there is a somewhat untold story about what's going on in Israel right now. Yes, there are hundreds of thousands of Jews from all over the world fleeing back to their homeland for safety. But at the same time, we are seeing, much like Jacob, a lot of Israelis leaving Israel and going to seek happiness elsewhere. Because it's understandable, there are many people with young families who are like, I don't want my children growing up with worrying about a bus blowing up, or rockets over their heads, or the next October 7th. I hate to point out that the world seems to be supporting the idea of a second Palestinian state, one that would end up likely like Gaza and a terror state aimed at the destruction of the Jewish people. I can understand why someone might say, maybe it's time for us to leave Israel, to get away from this hate, to get away from the constant rocket fire and mass stabbings and car rammings. I can understand it. And I said to my friend, where's everyone going to go? Because the irony is, we in the West are fleeing to Israel because things are so bad here. And the people who want to leave Israel don't really have anywhere else to go. Nowhere safe anyway. It really is just a very tragic situation where the world pretty much is back to 1930s hating Jews. There's no one who wants us anymore, and we are happy to go home. At least this time, we have a place to go home to. And I really hate to point out, how long until these Israelis who are now going over to the West, places like America and Canada, until they come back to Israel because they realize how terrible it truly is over here? In the end, it is pretty sad to see the state of affairs in the diaspora. The reality is that people in the diaspora are fleeing back to Israel in massive numbers. So much so that Israel has to prepare for a mass immigration event. Sad to say, the last mass immigration events were things like the Jewish Nakba, the almost 1 million Arabs who entered the land of Israel in 1948 after being kicked out of North Africa and the Middle East. We also had the Soviet Jews kicked out or fled persecution in the Soviet Union, not to mention the Ethiopian Jews who fled for their lives from Africa. The next step, unfortunately, seems to be the Jews of North America, who are going to have to flee back to the land of Israel. And as time goes by, it's getting more and more clear that things are not getting better in the West. The more the governments around the West are not helping and are actually supporting the people who want us dead, the less chance there is to turn this around. And if the story of Jacob's ladder tells us anything, it is that when we leave our homeland, we need a lot more protection. Things are a lot messier out here. Living in our homeland, in Israel, as difficult as it may be, we are much holier. We do have better angels. We are serving our purpose as Jewish people. I'm really just very worried because I don't know how much longer the angels in the diaspora will be able to protect us from this level of hate. This has been another episode of the Jewish Diaspora Report. Don't forget to check us out on social media at jdr.podcast and check out some of our other episodes on your favorite podcast source. We'll see you next time.